Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Boy, am I excited to share with you Doni Aldine today. She is a globally mobile Afro-Latina who has lived in and identified with 7 cultures on 5 continents before the age of 19. Aldine is passionate about creating community for cross-cultural populations and has extensive global experience in communications, media, and marketing. She is, in fact, the editor-in-chief of Cultures magazine, which is amazing. It is beautiful, beautiful magazine. She presents around the globe as a keynote speaker for conferences at major universities and major media outlets as an expert focused on communications, marketing, branding, and cross-cultural identity. Using these skills, she is on faculty in journalism and media communication at Colorado State University. Welcome to the show, Doni.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
I believe since last we talked, you were in Brazil? What were you doing in
I
Brazil?
was I was in Colombia and Peru, and actually
Okay.
I'm leaving from Mexico City in just a couple days.
Oh my goodness. I was
Yes, I'm
off. I was off. You were south of us, but wrong country. My bad. Okay. What were you doing down there? What do you do when you're out and, living your global life? I mean, what do you do?
Well, a couple of things. That trip was a little different. I was 5 months in South America, so I'm back for a month, and then I'm heading out again, and then I'll be back for a few weeks, and then I'll head back to my homeland of Costa Rica, or one of my homelands. But I was there for 2 reasons. So for the magazine, we have a destination in each issue. And so we go to that destination, we really dig in, everything's about the people. Really, it's about human connection, right? So we do recipes with people in their homes, sometimes in cooking classes, sometimes with restaurants. We find out, because food is often the heart of every culture, right? So we find out what that's about and get recipes to put in the magazine. We find out about the place that we're in, what makes it special, what makes the people special. We just do all the things, and we bring that to you in what we call our destinations. But this one was extra special for me. My father is Costa Rican, and he passed of COVID. He was fighting cancer, and he passed of COVID. He was fighting very valiantly, which really, really inspired me. And he got COVID on a Thursday, and by Easter Sunday, he was gone. So no one knew except for me. This was in my head that for decades I had intended, because when I was little, I lived in Spain, and so in my life, everyone spoke Spanish, and I was like, I want to be different. I want to speak something different. So I took 8 years of French. And then I ended up going to university in Germany. So those were languages that I learned, but I have like baby Spanish, right? So I wanted 20 years ago, gosh, was it 20 years? Maybe 30 years ago now, because I was with my ex-husband for 23 years. So, and I haven't been with him for 12. So I think like 30 years ago, I had
Math.
intended, maybe it was 20. I don't remember. We didn't get married right away. So, I intended to speak Spanish to him as a surprise at our celebration, and I never got to it. And then in all the decades since, it's been on my mind. I've been meaning to do that, and I never did it. I started, stopped, whatever. So when this happened, we did a tribute to my father in our summer issue last year. I'm looking to see if I have a copy here, and it's called Time for Change. And so we talked about COVID around the globe, and we talked about Blackness around the globe, and I did a tribute to him in that issue. So the rest of my tribute is to learn Spanish by the end of this year. So I
Wow.
practice every day. I was in South America in the end, it'll be like 8 months by the end of the year that I would have been down there. It would have suited me better to not be around so many English speakers.
That would have helped, huh?
It would have helped. So Colombia, I didn't move as far forth as I should have, but I learned my lesson, and we're on the track now. So that's why South America. And that's even with our other destinations, that's what we do. So at Cultures, the next year will be the year of Latin America. So, I'm going to Mexico City. We'll be covering that one next. Our next issue has Colombia. The one after that has Peru. Then it'll be Mexico City. Then my other homeland, Trinidad and Tobago, will be there for Carnival. Carnival.
Nice.
I haven't been to Carnival as an adult. This is going to be interesting. I must tell you, I'm like living my best life these days.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so first of all, how come why do you have so many homelands?
So, well, my mother is Trinidadian. My father's Costa Rican. I was lucky enough, sometimes I was interviewed, I was keynote for this conference. And the woman had said to me, "Oh, this is your heritage." And I said, "No, this is me." Like, because I lived there. It's not just my parents are from there. I also lived there. So at age 2 weeks, I was born in New York City. At age 2 weeks, I moved to Trinidad and Tobago. And so my first accent was Trinidadian. I was there until I was about 4, and then we went to Spain. And so multiple countries after that, I'm what's called a third culture kid. And those are people who are culturally fluid and geographically mobile, in this case, globally mobile. If you're mobile within one country, it's called a domestic third culture kid. And usually it's because of a parent's occupation. Sometimes it's for education. Sometimes it's for, who knows, in my case, my mother was a little bit of a nomad. And it took me many years of doing this research to finally figure out that my mother was a third culture kid as well. And so that really helped me understand them. I've been in this field for 18 years and doing so much research and hearing so many people's stories. But it wasn't until I finally realized that both my parents were TCKs, it took my understanding of them to a whole nother level. So that is why I moved so much. Third culture kid.
Wow.
And there are 238 million people around the globe that live outside of their passport country as of 2018. So that's one of the groups.
Sure. So what about knowing this about your parents? What changed for you in your understanding of them?
Well, so in this research, wow, that's such a great question. In this research, I learned so much about the dimensionality of the people within that realm, within that subculture, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. So whether you're a military brat or an immigrant, a missionary kid, an educational TCK, all of those different things have different nuances because of the way you experience that cultural fluidity and geographic mobility. And the way you experienced it changes how you see the world. And so once I realized that and realized the dimensions that each of my parents came from, it gave me a larger picture of who they were and why they act certain ways. I knew certain things just because of where they came from. And having lived in those countries, I understood those things. And now realizing, oh, well, they have some of the same traits that I have. Okay. They're not crazy. I actually did think that. It's like, oh, okay, now this makes more sense. But it also gave insight to how people might see me, right? Like I didn't really see my parents as crazy, but I clearly something in me thought they were a little quirky or something like that, because there was a switch once I realized. I was like, oh, yeah, that was the missing piece for me. Now I understand them fully. Now I give them a little more grace with certain things, because I understand that it's not that just that they're an immigrant, or it's not just that they're thinking of things from the homeland, but they also have that in between space where your foot is in two different worlds. And remembering that whenever a certain situation happens makes a difference in how you experience that situation, and you give more grace for that. So it goes back to that saying that people say, you never, something like, be kind to everyone because you never know what people are going through. And I try to remember that all the time. And this was just another example of, aha, this is why. You never know what people's stories are. Sometimes they don't even know, because my parents didn't know this, right? Wow. So now I have a piece of their story that they didn't even understand. So
having a foot in two different cultures changes the way that you experience things that are going on in the culture that you're in currently, is what I'm hearing you say. And does it complicate things? What kinds of, what I guess are the markers, or what are the benefits or even some of the challenges of being a TCK?
Well, you're 100% correct. And there are a lot of both. So some of the benefits is you're very adaptable, typically. You are very observant, typically. You kind of have to be, especially, all of these changes happen when you're a child. So a lot of people, they turn 18 and they start traveling and they say, oh, I'm a TCK. Well, actually, you're not. You're a third culture adult, which means you were geographically mobile and culturally fluid as an adult. So after 18, an adult TCK, which is what I am. So I was a third culture kid because I experienced these things while I was forming my identity as a child. And now my identity is formed. And as an adult, I live out the traits that I don't want to say learned, formed as a child. Okay. So again, you're more adaptable. You are more open. You tend to really absorb the culture and environment around you and the people around you. You're more resilient because you have to move so much. At the beginning of COVID, I had to chuckle a little bit because, as you mentioned, some of the challenges are some of those same things that, okay, you're constantly picking up and moving, or some people don't move that much, but most TCKs do, right? You constantly have to make new friends. You constantly have to learn a new place, a new culture, a new language, all these things, right? That different people accept in a different way, right? Sometimes it makes you more gregarious and outgoing, and because you learn how to really be a magnet for people. Sometimes it turns you into a wallflower because you just want to keep to yourself and you don't want to be noticed. Sometimes it makes you what's called a screamer, which is you want to be yourself and you don't want people to put you in a box and tell you who you are. So you're like, whether you get tattoos or paint your face or whatever the case may be, however you want to lash out, that is your way of doing it. So those are some of the gifts and some of the challenges that come with it. TCKs tend to be, as adults, entrepreneurs because, you're used to striking out on your own. You have that adaptability, that resilience, some of the traits that are needed for that type of career. They also tend to be more highly educated than the general population. Often it's because whether someone was a missionary kid or an educational TCK, you've been around more education. So that's probably why. But also it might be that you just seek more things. You seek more knowledge because of your experience as a child. So those are just a few of the gifts and the challenges that you have to face.
It sounds like learning about other people, learning about your culture that you're in and the different ones that you end up being in, probably, I would think that it would do something in the brain to make you more adaptable, that brain plasticity, things aren't getting carved out quite so deeply in terms of the pathways of this is the way things are for me. I could see how that would also translate into wanting to continue to learn, because when your brain is already, I guess, ripe for learning, it's sort of like, a object in motion stays in motion, I think, I could see that would be the case.
Definitely. I do think, there's a spectrum too. And some people are way at this end. I think I'm way at this end. Other people are way at that end. So I love to learn all the time. Right. Yeah. And there's some people that it's like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm out.
Sure.
I did enough learning. And that goes for everything. I did enough moving. I did enough traveling, whatever. There's some people, a smaller section of the population who are on that, let's say, left side of the spectrum, but there's a lot of people who are on the right side who really embrace a lot of the things that come to them, a lot of the gifts, and hopefully overcome the challenges that come as well. A lot of times there could be abandonment issues, there could be attachment issues, commitment issues, because you're not used to staying around, right?
Sure. Yeah. So what role does Cultures Magazine play for TCKs?
So, cultures, thank you for asking. Man, it's near and dear to my heart. It's really more than a passion. I feel like this is my purpose. I feel like, having had this life since age 2 weeks, that that plus my media and marketing experience and business background really all brought me to this place where we created a media conglomerate that is focused on human connection. So Cultures celebrates cross-cultural identity because we think everyone should feel like they matter.
Yeah.
So TCKs and immigrants and refugees and mixed race people, all the people who are in between tend to be people that are overlooked. They're the marginalized of the marginalized. So we want to give a voice, give a place where they can feel like they belong, where they feel like other people understand them. Because when you live this life, and when you have a breadth of experience, you see the world this way and you can understand the perspective of many different people. But if most people you encounter see the world in this perspective or this perspective, you're always the one who has to go through the machinations to understand, to build bridges, to help people come together. Those are some of the gifts as well. And the challenge that comes with that is sometimes you feel like, gosh, I wish I didn't have to explain myself so much, or I wish people understood me.
It's a
So
lot of
when you're
work.
around, yes, it's a lot of work, constant. So when you're around people who just get you, it's
Ugh.
fantastic. And that's what Cultures is about. It's about really having a place for that understanding and being around people who get you. So whether it's our media, it's the products that we create or the experiences that we have that we offer to our population, it's really about feeling like you belong and being in a place where people get you.
Hmm. And every human needs that, and it makes so
Right.
much sense. I
Yes.
I like that you're focused on human connection. Um, how does a magazine focus on human connection?
So, it's interesting. I think it's easy for people to get lost in, say, the destinations or the things like people always say, what's your next country? What's on your bucket list? And it's really funny because I don't see it as a bucket list, right? Like I just see it as experiencing people, right? So that's what we do at Cultures, whether it's we're visiting a place or we're doing a thing or creating a dish. It's really the things that brings humans together, right? And the articles, a lot of the articles, they're really about the humans. Even when we visit the places, it's about why people are the way they are and how they think. And so a lot of the stories we discuss, it's interesting. Any entrepreneur knows that along the journey, there are certain things, and any business owner knows, you have to let certain people go at certain times. Um, every stage of your business is different, and you have to let it flower and grow. So you have to move through those different stages. And one of my stages was realizing, well, I started with, okay, only people who are part of this population can be part of the magazine because they're the ones who are going to get it and can give good stories, right? But that was difficult because not all those people had a media background or a writing background. And it was a lot of work to train them to show them how this works, right? And a lot of expectation from them to show us, for us to show them how it works. I'm like, good Lord, this is a lot. So then I said, well, maybe I just need trained journalists, people who know how to do this work. They should be able to tell the stories because they're supposed to, that's what we do, right? We're supposed to be able to adapt and learn and put ourselves in the perspective of other people. Well, that's what we're supposed to do, but not everybody is great at that, right? So we oh gosh, it's so funny. The two issues where I had the most experienced writers and editors and designers and paid the most money to get those well, we pay more now, but at the time had
Yeah.
paid the most money to get those issues done, I feel are our driest issues. I had the most complaints from our contributors who are part of this community because when their articles came out, they called me complaining, my story changed. Why did they take this out? Why did they take that out? It's not even, it doesn't even talk about her being a TCK anymore. And therein whatever. Therein was the problem, right? That they took the humanity out of it for the people who are in between. They took the in-betweenness out of it because they didn't understand what it felt to be like in between. So it might be a key word in a whole article, maybe 1 or 2 words, maybe a couple sentences, maybe a reference that they thought was extraneous. Why is this in here? We don't need this. Let me take it out and tighten up the story. Well, the story might be tighter, but now it has no interest to the population because the population doesn't see the connection to them.
Sure.
Right? So that's the human connection part. That is the storytelling. It's really about humans and their experiences and explaining it in a way and describing the feelings and the outcomes in a way that other people who are like you understand completely. They get it right away. You don't have to explain it to them. But the people who don't, even though they're very experienced in their field, this isn't necessary. Why is this here? And they take it out. So yes, I had many of our contributors were up in arms. The editors were frustrated because they felt like, oh, it's so much work to clean up the stories of these people that didn't know how to do the writing in the way that they quote unquote should. And so then I embraced that, okay, we have to teach people with this experience how to be journalists because it's much more difficult to do it the other way around. People who have the skill, but not the experience of living this life aren't going to be able to get it as readily as people who have the experience living this life, but don't have the skill, whatever, to be a journalist, to be a columnist, to be a writer, a photographer, whatever the case may be. And so we went back to having people who are part of the population contribute the stories. So hopefully all of our stories are really heartfelt, and every single issue we go through and we make sure visually we represent all different people, and that we also represent the hidden diversity in our population. So whether it's an immigrant story or a refugee story or a military brat story, a missionary kid story, a mixed race story, all the things, we try to make sure that we have representation so everyone can have something that they really hold on to.
You really feel seen and, like you said, connected when you're represented, when you see yourself represented. Yeah.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that because really that's what it's about, feeling seen, not feeling marginalized, not feeling overlooked, not feeling like you constantly have to explain, not being exhausted.
It's funny, even my son, we live in a very honestly homogenous kind of area. I'll be, completely honest with you. And, but even just when it comes to personality and gifting or whatever, he's 12 and he just said to me, I asked him the other day, what makes a great friend, or how do you know when you've really connected with a good friend? And he said, when I can show my true colors.
Oh, wow. I was listening to something the other day. They were talking about bringing your representative, like when you're dating, right? Have you ever heard that?
No. Tell me.
Well, it's your representative is the person that you show to people when you want them to accept you, right? So you're dating, and it's not the real you that's dating. It's 2 representatives that come. So they were just talking about how long it takes until the real you comes out, right?
So true.
Oh yeah, that's kind of what your son was saying. Oh, when I can show my real me, then I know that's a friend. Because then you trust the person, right? You feel safe. You feel seen. You know that the person knows you, from every nook and cranny. So whatever they see won't scare them because they're your friend, right? They're still going to stick around. Yeah, I like how insightful at a young age.
Yeah. I think of all of the dissension and the culture wars and whatever is going on right now with, and probably has been forever, but we're really feeling it right now. It seems like, when we dig down deep, that if everybody needs that human connection, everybody needs to feel seen. And when we have that sense, like a rooted sense of identity, and that we're acknowledged for that, there's less to be threatened by, and when other people are different.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you said it, say a rooted sense of identity. One of the big things about TCKs is rootedness or restlessness, right? And that's kind of that spectrum I was talking to you about. Do you want to just stay in one place, or do you feel like you need to move every 2 years like you did when you were a child, or you need to explore the world, that there's no place that you can settle? And so that's what culture really is all about. It's about identity and feeling comfortable in that identity, having that space to be that friend, right? Oh, I like that, to be that friend who gets you and sees the good parts and the bad parts and still loves you, you know? Yeah, identity truly is what it's about. And knowing that you can feel comfortable in your identity, that there are other people like you.
I'm not sure how all this relates, but I feel like I have personally just been going through this, a little bit of this, looking at my culture and saying, okay, so what of this stays and what of this is going to go? Because I'm not happy with everything, that's for sure. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like trying to get back down to a little bit more of an essence of it or something. Like, I want to feel rooted. I want to feel like I come from somewhere. I want to feel like I love my people. I don't want to feel like I'm upset or frustrated with them all the time. I want to, I love that idea of feeling like you're part of something, but at the same time, there's that, there's a little bit of or quite a bit of dissonance or this frustration still in me about it. And, do you think that that is something that people in general, will just say, experience? Like, how do you, I guess as a TCK, you get to pick and choose what you're going to adopt and what you're not going to adopt of whatever culture you're in. Maybe you get to pick and choose. Maybe it's more formed in you. I don't know. Maybe you have a different thought on
No,
that.
I like that. I mean, I never thought about that, but I guess you're right. You do get to pick and choose because you eventually leave that place, right? So when you go to a new place, they have new different customs and norms. So yeah, you get to pick and choose which ones you bring from the old place.
What are you going to keep?
Right. Yes.
That's interesting because, I mean, I wonder how much of that is just, well, I'm going to keep the things that are the easiest to keep, or, that it's not conscious, and how much is conscious. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm realizing how much was not conscious in me for so long. And now I'm wanting to be conscious about it and actually pick and choose.
Yes.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's why I'm saying, oh wow, I never thought of it that way because it wasn't conscious for me, right? I was just doing the things, well, and I guess there were some things that were conscious, like, so I call my mother Mummy, right? And I remember this guy actually over pandemic, my massage therapist. I was doing something. I was like, I think I was on the phone with her mom. She called when I was over there, and I said, Mummy, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, Mommy. I'm like, how did Mummy sound like mommy? Like, I'm like, it's different. No, that's not what I said. Right. And what was packed in that statement, or that word that he said, was like, literally you could see the air words forming, like, why do you still call your mother mommy? Right. Well, I don't call my mother mommy. I call my mother mummy. And in that culture, you do that your entire life, right? You might say mom when you're talking about her, but when you're addressing her, you say mummy. And actually, my older brother and I mean, we're in our 50s. So we called our dad daddy. That's a thing. That's something I chose to hold on to. My little brothers are much more American. So they call my mom, they call her mom. I don't know if they ever called her mommy, because we all called her mummy, I think. But as they got older, as many people in the US do, that changed to mom, right? And yeah, that's not something I chose to pick up. It's something I like. And had I had children, they would have called me mummy, which probably would have been weird for them because they probably would have grown up in the US and been like, why do you want me to do this? And nobody else calls their mom mummy. This is strange. But that's something I mean, I don't know why I love it so much. I just love it. That's
Yeah.
who she is. Like, and I don't want to change that name. Yeah, I love it.
I wonder why we choose certain things and don't choose others when we do have the choice. I feel like I've had to really think about what is loving and helpful and kind and generous about my community and what I
Mm-hmm.
can let go of. And when I let go of these other things, I can appreciate the good things even more.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. I mean, our brains can take so much, which is also,
Hmm.
at university, I see it every semester. It gets deeper and deeper for students. I think they have a higher level of anxiety and depression and these days because we have so much. My theory is we have so much information coming at us. It's a lot to handle. Our brains can only do so much. So, all the technology and our phones and all the things all the time, they're fantastic, but I can't. I wonder what the new research says. But a few years ago, research had said that we get more information in a year than someone in the 1500s received in their entire lives.
Wow.
Right. So if you
Yeah.
think of the same brain, the same human brain processing that information, and now having the expectation of acting like you always did before, we need to find ways. I think that's why self-care is, and that's a big theme in cultures as well, because of how much we have to process as mobile people, as people with feet in two different places, um, two different worlds, whether it's cultural or geographic. And yeah, self-care is huge because we have so much coming at us. And how are we going to process that? How are we going to stay sane? How are we going to stay stable? So yeah, I think that's a big observation.
Does self-care look different in different cultures?
That's interesting. Yes, I think 100% yes. And it's interesting, even within regional differences, I think self-care is different. And what I've come to is people have to decide what self-care looks like for them. A lot of times, a lot of magazines will show taking a bath or, gosh, what are some of the things? Getting a massage, and all those things are self-care, right? But I think a workout is self-care. I think some time alone, and I love music and I play music all the time. I'd say most of the time music is self-care, but like last night, I just sat in quiet, right? And the silence was self-care, right? Taking a walk, being in nature. So I think each person is different and within each culture, and your cultural differences and your surroundings are going to change what you choose to enjoy for self-care. But it's whatever fills your cup, whatever nurtures you, whatever makes your soul sing. To me, that is self-care.
Hmm. So it's important to explore that.
Yeah, very much so. I mean,
Figure that out for
yeah,
yourself.
it's more than, and sometimes it's being around people, sometimes it's being by yourself, sometimes it's reading. Yeah, everyone is different. And whatever it is that fills you up, take some time, I think, to do it every day, because you want to be proactive, right? You want to kind of fill that cup before it gets depleted, not wait till it gets depleted and then try to fill it up, which is much more difficult. So yeah, I try to do that every day.
Okay, so I was looking at one of your articles in the magazine, and we're just reminded of cultural power and lack of power and power dynamics between cultures. And I'm curious, what you talk about journalism, you teach journalism. What role can journalism play in shifts of cultural power?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, it's really interesting. So, university just started for this semester, and life still looks different for most people around the world. And so the students are still adapting, one, to coming out in the world and seeing people. Boy, I do see a big difference in people now that they've been locked up for a while, right?
What do you see?
I
What do you
just
see?
I think people are more open. It's really interesting, whether it's dating or hanging out or making friends. Even in myself, I see it where people are much more open. They're doing things they wouldn't have done before. They're associating with people they wouldn't have associated. Now, within this lockdown, which I don't think is an accident, we also had all the social strife, right? All the upheaval around the world. And so I think people also were able to glean perspectives that were different than theirs. And so they emerged different people, right? They emerged um, more, I don't want to say growth minded, but yeah, I've just been really interested to see, especially in the dating world, how much more open people are to new experiences and other people, right? And doing things they never did before, myself included. I'm doing all these things. It's so funny. A friend said to me the other night, "Oh, it's like you're a teenager again. You're doing all the things you should have done as a teenager." I'm like, I didn't even do these things. I didn't even think about these things as a teenager. I'm doing them now, which by the way is a TCK thing. It's called oh gosh, delayed adolescence. When,
Interesting.
you know, because you mature so quickly.
Yeah.
So you're very mature at an early age. And delayed adolescence is when you revert back. And so apparently that's what I'm doing now.
How fun. How great would that be to be, you know, to be able to have that kind of fun as an adult with all the wisdom you already have.
All the wisdom, much more cash flow.
Great. You got the money, you got the wisdom,
Oh
you're ready to go.
You also have to be careful because you can't do those silly things that you would have done as a kid and people go, "Oh, they're just a kid," right? It's like,
Oh,
no,
right.
you're an adult. You should know better. Why did you do that? It's like, I don't know. I was reverting.
COVID.
Yes,
Shake
COVID.
Shake it off. COVID.
That's the answer for everything. I love it. Oh,
So
gosh.
shifts in power dynamics and journalism.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to think what that would be, what that would entail. So the reason I started to tell you that story about my students with university starting is that I already have had the conversation with them that when they look to media that's out there, it's not necessarily representative of how it's supposed to be done, right? There are a lot of poor writers in media right now. There are a lot of poor habits in media right now. And so my students look at that and they think that's, you know, this is professional media. This is how it's supposed to be done. And they turn it in and they say, "Well, why did you mark me out for that?" Well, this is not how you're supposed to. I mean, saying things like "this is not how you're supposed to do it" sounds strange in certain instances, but when you're getting trained for a skill, the skill has particular parts to it for a reason, right? Like
And we want to be able to at least look to journalists as people who are truth tellers, people who are able to see things the way that they are and report them back in a way that we can see things with clarity.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of integrity that we are hoping for. There's a lot of, you know, best practices that we don't know about that we're hoping for. We're just sort of counting on journalists to have those.
And those expectations are real. And it's a tall order because most people have a hard time thinking outside of themselves. So when we talk about that breadth of experience, you know, for instance, a TCK should be able to give you a better perspective because they've lived in worlds where they had to be outside of themselves on a regular basis. And I can tell you that in my class, that's an essential for my class. It's called Media and Global Culture Identity. And if you take it, people who take it, I warn them in the beginning that it's really about extending yourself, thinking outside of that box, outside of the world that you're used to. And I can tell you that it's very difficult for most people. The people who have the hardest time are the people who think they know what we're going to talk about when we're coming into the class. So ethnic studies students, I tell them, okay, you might have to throw out everything you know. And actually, it's not throwing it out. It's keeping that because that has a realm, that has a certain place. That is usually a US based way of thinking of races and ethnicities, et cetera, et cetera. But what we talk about in my class is culturally based. So someone might have a specific race and you might mention it, but it's not about their race. It's about their culture, right? And the ones who have the hardest time are the ones who have extensive experience in ethnic studies, because it's hard for them to think outside of what they've already learned, that to realize that this is a different way of learning and something new that they need to absorb and ascertain, right? So the same thing with journalism. um, I think many journalists have a hard time thinking outside of themselves. So when you get news stories, we must remember, as a critical consumer of news, we must remember that we're also getting the insight of the person who reported that story.
Mm.
And if that person has limited ability to think outside of their own experiences, be open to new experiences, to consider other possibilities, even when they're doing the reporting. So to look to other people to give different perspective and give a balance of perspective, then the information that you're consuming, I don't want to say it's tainted, but it's limited, right? And that is the hard part, I think, of news today. And actually, I think that's what people would need to do to make a shift, a cultural shift, right? We need to, right now, it's about empathy. It should always be about empathy, but I think it's a thing right now. Empathy and understanding the other side. If we took more time to do that, if we learned how to do that, that's what I try to teach my class. But shoot, people come to me, they're like 20 some years old, right? So it's like trying to change who you are in 16 weeks. And some people do it very successfully. Many struggle because they don't see, why do they have to do this, right? I never have to do this again in my life. But the tools you learn in my class actually are very helpful in career. They're helpful in business. It's helpful for self-care even, right? Because if you can understand other people better, just like going back to what I said about my parents, that understanding changed the dynamic of our relationship and changed how I saw them. So now there's less confusion, there's less strife, there's less wondering. There's just a sense of peace. So when you can think outside of yourself and understand others better and give empathy, experience empathy, it actually helps you as well. So for me, that's a form of self-care that I practice daily.
Yeah. I mean, it's always interesting to me that the need for, and then also the somehow balance, I don't know what even that word means, but the balance of a journalistic integrity with their humanity. And like you were talking about, you guys also focus on human connection, and that's not necessarily what every journalist focuses on. But yet there has to be some sort of connection. Why does this matter? There has to be a reason why something matters too. It's all really interesting to me. I feel really grateful for really good journalists. I feel really, and more so, I think, even with investigative journalism and what I've seen, of course, go back to Ronan Farrow and the Me Too movement, really picking up again with his work on Harvey Weinstein, and then just like all of these things being exposed, which I think does help shift dynamics. When things are exposed, power dynamics are, they're exposed, and then people see them for what they are, and then they start to reorient themselves. It just seems like a really big responsibility and important thing.
It is a big responsibility, and I think that's a great observation. I just had that conversation with one of my team members at the university the other day. Because, right now the word professionalism is being challenged, because often in the past it was used as a way to not demean, but to tell people that they weren't enough to do certain things. So even the way my hair looks right now, there's a time, a very recent time, when this wouldn't have been considered professional, right? And which is funny, because I think of some of the styles that I would wear to work, and I feel like this is more professional than that.
Yeah, describe your hair, because it's beautiful. Tell me why, because people listening aren't going to know what you're talking about.
Yes. Well, I love my hair, and it's so funny. The colors, sometimes I do wonder, I'm like, is this professional? So, okay. So my hair is salt and pepper in the front, and It's black in the back. You can see it more if I put it up, right?
Uh-huh.
Black. Well, you can see it. They can't. It's black in the back, and I have it in locks. So just for some of you out there, they're not dreadlocks; they are locks, and because the curl pattern is locked in and kind of stretched, right? So um, yeah, so I would say, and there are different ways to do locks. The way I have mine, I feel like it looks fantastic. And so I also have some platinum locks throughout, and a couple of auburn locks, and some what's called blonde. It's like a brownish blonde. So like 3 or 4 of my locks are dipped and dyed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there was a time when different colors in your hair would not have been accepted, right? And so 3 or 4 is not a lot. It's not extreme.
No,
but I
it's
already
not.
have the silver and the black going on. So it already looks like I have all these colors.
It adds dimension.
I get stopped all the time. People love it, man.
I love
Shoot.
it.
I'm like, I don't have time to dye my hair. That's self-care for me. For me, it's people spend all this time putting on makeup, spend all this time. I remember I had when I worked for Johnson and Johnson. Well, and we'd go to conferences, and I had the same roommate all the time who was within the company because we'd come from all over the country, and she would spend 2 hours every morning getting ready.
Oh,
And I
wow.
literally spend maybe 10 minutes, and 5 of those are in the shower. So I'm really about maintaining yourself, maintaining your skin, maintaining your health, maintaining your nails so that you look your best at all times. And there's not much effort to put into going out, right? Okay, let me put on some lipstick and zhuzh my hair, I'm out. That's
So
it.
I mean, we were talking about professionalism, but also humanity. I mean, I think that your hair is a really great representation of your voice. It's part of your voice. It's part of your
Mm,
self-expression to me.
mm.
When I hear you speak and you laugh a lot, I don't know, the tone goes up and down, like there is dimension to who you
Animated.
are. Yeah, you're animated. So your hair just is like this natural kind of, even though you've crafted it, if you will, I mean, it's a natural expression of you and your voice. And I think so how does a journalist how does a journalist bring that, their humanity, their voice to the
Mm.
story, while at the same time making sure they're not going over and they're not skewing the story in a way that's I don't know, with an agenda.
That's a very interesting question. Okay, so the first thought I had is they're not supposed to bring their voice to the story, right? But they're not, what they're not supposed to bring is their perspective, right? It's supposed to be objectivity, which, face it, that's hard. Like nobody can take themselves out of anything to be so objective that it's 100% clean, right? There's always going to be your perspective because that's the way you see the world. That's the way you see things. That's how you reported the story. Um, but I guess in terms of voice, it's style, right? And that's what we're talking about. If we go back to hair, that's just style, right? So you're right. This is reflective of my style, of how I live my life, even.
Mm.
And so a journalist can do the same. Your manner of writing, let's say you're a broadcast journalist, your manner of speaking, your manner of presenting, all of that comes through. So that's what really people relate to, in addition to the work. Your
Mm.
style is what makes the work appealing to other people. So when you think of Oprah as an example, they didn't think she was the greatest journalist. She didn't excel. She excelled actually quite well, but not to the level that she wanted, because she was too emotional in her journalism. It's supposed to be objective. You're not supposed to cry at the firefighter, telling the story about whom they just rescued. You're supposed to have a steady face and just present the news to people. But that style of hers was perfect for a talk show where people want to connect and they want to feel that emotion and they want to know because they're not there. Of course, energy is different when you're sitting in a place with someone. But one of the gifts I think Oprah gives us is that we get a sense of that energy coming through her because she reacts to the person, right? We can't do that. We can only feel through the television. I'm an empath, so I can still feel their energy, but not everybody can, right? So Oprah gives us the gift of, oh, this is how it impacts me in this moment. And then we get a sense of what that impact would feel like for us, right? So your style, I think, is how you get those messages across, whether it's how you write the words, how you choose to form the sentences, how you speak the words, how you act in an interview. All of those things are part of your style. Even with you, this is your style, right? And that's what your listeners are looking for when they come back. They might not know it, but it's the style that you bring across that they relate to and it gives them something, whether it makes them feel good or it makes them trust you, whatever the case may be. And that style is what makes the difference.
2 more questions for you. First of all, where can people find Cultures Magazine, find you, connect with you, whatever you'd like to share?
Yeah, so right now, it's a very good question, because starting in, I think, October of this year, we're still deciding, but I think we're going to pull off of newsstands. So right now, you can find, yes. I know it's a big decision. I've been contemplating it for a couple of years.
Okay.
But we could find us in select Kroger stores, Books A Million, university bookstores, independent bookstores. Where else? I feel like I'm forgetting some. And Army and Air Force exchange stores. That's where you can find us. If you go to our website at culturesmag.com, so there's no E in cultures, it is plural. The missing E stands for the hidden diversity of our population. So CULTURS mag.com. And on the navigation bar, you'll see about us, and that will tell you where to find a print store near you. Right now, there are many, many hundreds of stores that carry us. And yes, I think as of October 2021, that will not be the case. I think that we're going to go to an internal distribution. It's a scary decision, so that's why it's not finished. But as of November 2021, this is 2021, we will be featured in American Airlines on all of their flights. So reach of about 5 million people. So we're excited about that. Yeah. Yes.
That's awesome. How amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So lots of things. I mean, we're all around the world. Our digital editions are read in 208 countries and territories. And our print edition is in many hundreds of stores. And we'll see what that looks like for the future. We're always evolving. It's kind of scary, but our subscribers have a hard time. Sometimes the store thing, because we're not in every store, because not every store has the population that will read our publication. So it makes it difficult for people to find us.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to work through that. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So my last question for you is, what last piece of advice would you give somebody who really would like to have a voice of influence?
Ooh, be yourself. I mean, that seems so generic, but here's what I mean. You know, there's so many ways that society tells us that we're not good enough. We need to be different. We need to be better. We need to be like this person. And whomever you are, I think you just need to embrace that, right? Like I embrace that I'm all about taking care of yourself so that you don't have to spend all this time putting on paint and putting things in and on that make you look better, right? Like I'm all about getting ready fast, being prepared for anything that happens, whether it's at work or personally or whatever. So having systems and a foundation, and that's what is key to me. So I would say find what's key to you. What makes your life hum? What makes it work the way you want it to work, not the way other people tell you that it should work. So yeah, be yourself seems generic, but I need you to go deeper on that. What does that mean to you? Who are you? Do you even know, right? Take the time to find out. It might be years of exploration to figure that out. And once you do, stick to it, which actually is not an easy task. It sounds so simple. Oh, be yourself. That's pretty hard in today's world, in any world. But that would be my suggestion, to have a voice of influence, because when you're yourself, you're truly authentic, people can feel it. And then you are able to influence people.
Love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, for sharing your voice of influence with our listeners, with the world, and your magazine. And I'm really honored to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was such a pleasure. So much fun.